Mac time Fellaini and Mad Titch midfield, man doing up Lakers. Every time we face big team, I'm like, fam, have I really got to watch this? Camped in our own boxes, dog shit. Formation looking like mosh pit.
Welcome to episode 2 of this podcast. This is going to be the first podcast of a series that I'm doing called Living With Lupus. If you don't know, I have lupus. I've been diagnosed a few years ago. And yeah, so hopefully this series will just be me sharing my experiences and hopefully other people coming on and sharing their experiences as well. So before I start, I just want to say thank you for all the views on the first episode. Thank you for the feedback. Keep watching it. If you haven't watched it or listened to it, then go and listen to it. But yeah. So what is lupus? Because most people in the world, but most people listening to this probably don't have lupus. So lupus is a chronic illness and an autoimmune disease. So chronic meaning that it's a long-term illness, and autoimmune meaning that it has to do with the immune system, like attacking itself, attacking your own body. So in terms of SLE, because there are two types of lupus, discoid lupus and SLE, I don't have discoid lupus. That's mainly to do with the skin. I have SLE, and for me anyway, it's mainly to do with my joints and stuff. I'm going to read from this Lupus UK booklet that I received. So they say lupus is a chronic illness, but they also say that living with lupus is often unpredictable. So one thing a lot of people say to describe how it is to have a chronic illness. So imagine that a normal person has like 7 spoons a day. So spoons represent energy. So someone with a long-term illness probably has 3 or 4 a day. So we use these spoons on like regular things, brushing your teeth, going to school, just stuff that you do in a day. But for someone with a long-term illness, obviously you have less spoons, so you have less energy, and it's just harder to do things. So often we either have to take spoons from the next day, which means not sleeping this day and feeling bad tomorrow just so you can get something done, or you just don't do what you can't do, which means you can't necessarily go out with your friend that day, or you're just going to have to leave that piece of work for tomorrow because there's just no spoons left, there's no energy left. So yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Or imagine having a cold that doesn't get better. That's a simple way to describe it. So the main signs and symptoms of lupus are fatigue, joint problems, just inflammation in general. Sometimes more serious inflammation in your heart and lungs. But sometimes, those swellings, random swellings on your knees and stuff like that. Mouth ulcers and this butterfly rash that a lot of people have. So for me, if you see my face, you can tell that my cheeks are a bit darker than the rest of my face, because I still have the rash. It used to be much worse, but I still have that butterfly rash on my cheeks. So moving on to diagnosis. I was diagnosed a few years ago, 2013, and just to say, just as a disclaimer, the average time that someone waits before they're diagnosed with lupus in the UK especially is about 6 to 7 years. So that's ridiculous in itself, because during that 6-7 years, your lupus can go from being like a cold that doesn't stop to being something that gives you kidney failure, which is what happened to people like Selena Gomez. So that alone is very problematic. But for me, it didn't take that long. Maybe it did, but because I got diagnosed earlier than most people, in my teens, then I thank God for that, because I haven't suffered with these major kidney problems. But yeah, so I was diagnosed a few years ago. So what kept happening when I went to the GP was that I've had eczema since I was born. So I'd go to the GP and they'd give me eczema creams, but they just wouldn't. The eczema wouldn't clear up. My arms were always bleeding because as a kid, you're just going to scratch whatever feels itchy. So that would make my arms bleed and stuff like that. And then another thing that kept happening at the GP was that I kept getting UTIs. So I think urinary tract infections. So I kept getting those. And it was just a bit strange because at this point I was like 6 years old. And for me to be getting infections like that was very strange. Like me and my mum, especially my mum, she'd just be confused because why is my child always getting ill for no reason? And the GP, they'll just fix the problem. They don't necessarily have time as a part of the NHS to look into something that keeps happening. So I got those UTIs at least 5 times. And yeah, just every time I went to the GP, it would just be something different that just, yeah, it was just long for me to go to a GP. I'd end up missing a lot of school for no reason. So then one day, I come back from school. It's about 6 p.m. and I couldn't get up. So I was lying on the floor and I couldn't get up. And then my mum comes in. Like, obviously your family's worried, like, why can't you get up? So my mum comes in. She's like, why can't you get up? I'm just like, I'm stuck. Because what it felt like my body was burning a bit. And I could tell, like, I felt swollen. My body was burning a bit. My temperature was just a bit high. So I could tell something was wrong. So then, at this time, I went to a private hospital, basically. So they rushed me to that private hospital. And then I was there for like 24 hours. I didn't sleep there, but I was there for a while. And then they were just like, okay, so I think you have arthritis, like juvenile arthritis. Because it was clear that like my joints were swollen. I couldn't bend my knees properly and stuff like that. So they said, that's what you might have. Then I went to another hospital, another Great Portland Street in London. It's a hospital for children and mothers. So I went there, and I went there for a while, and the doctor I saw there was really good. So in after a few months of blood tests, weighing me, whatever. I remember I used to go every day because this happened during a summer holiday. So that summer holiday of 2013, literally every weekday, me and my mum would go to Great Portland Street. And then, yeah, we just go in for tests or whatever, blood tests. So then, very soon, he was like, yeah, you literally have all the symptoms of lupus, basically. You have this scar on your face, your joints are swelling, blah, blah, blah. So, quite quickly, he figured out, like, this is probably lupus. Like, there's nothing. I had all the symptoms. I had the butterfly scar, all the swelling, whatever. So he figured out that it was lupus. And I remember one day I go in, and he's like, to me and my mum, basically, I think, you probably have lupus. I'm going to do a final test to make sure in terms of my blood. So I'm going to do a final test on your blood to make sure. And the next day I'll tell you whether you have it or not. So, obviously, that moment was... So, I'm 11 at this point. I didn't really know what was going on. So, I was like, yeah, whatever. If I have it, I have it. If I don't, I don't, kind of thing. So, the next day, we come back in. And he's like, yeah, you have it. And, obviously, my mum was more upset than me because she'd already done the research about lupus and how difficult it can be to live with it. But me... as an 11-year-old, I'm just like, whatever, And then there's this level in your blood, ESR levels. So I think they're the levels of double-stranded DNA in your blood. So it says here, the test is raised by inflammation. It is not specific to lupus, and it can go up when you have various illnesses. Right, so it's not, yeah, so it's just a test for information. So he said that the average person has an ESR level of 50, and he's like, your ESR level is 4,000. And that's when I was like, raw. This is not a joke. But still, I'm 11 and I still don't really know what's going on. So I was just like, oh, right, okay. So obviously I have to take medicine for this. So yeah, that's how my diagnosis came about. As soon as the doctor figured out what was going on, he got me on the right medication. And from there, I've just been dealing with my lupus. I haven't been on with a private hospital all this time. I stopped going in that same year even.
Nah, man, Jose, you gotta go. Ed's not gonna tell you, but nah, man, Jose, you gotta know. No signings, we gone cold. Please don't open the window. If that man is involved, he's not trying to sign no one till they're at least 29 years old.